Hey everybody, welcome to another Good e-Reader review video. My name is Michael.
This is Peter.
Today we're going to give you a taste of the Samsung Galaxy S4. And in this tasty review, we're going to give you a sense of what the hardware is all about, software, and put a special emphasis on the overall e-reading experience. Of course, with Good e-Reader, we always put a priority on newspapers, magazines, comics, and everything that you would consume on that level. First of all, let's give you a sense of the specs. It's a 5-inch screen. The resolution is 1920 by 1080, so it's about the same resolution as the HTC One. It has a quad-core Cortex A15 processor, and it has a dedicated GPU. 2 gigs of RAM, different storage options depending on what you really need it for, so 16, 32, or 64 gigs. Of course, it does have SD card support, so you can enhance it up to 64 gigs. Cameras, very solid. 2 megapixels in the front and 13 megapixels on the back. So, Peter, give us a sense of what this is all about.
Alright, the front face of it, nothing to write home about. Very simple, very cookie cutter looking, black screen, and then colored bezel around it. No really defining features. Most phones look like this. So you'll see that you have motion sensors, light sensors, camera, and speaker at the front, earpiece at the front. You have some buttons on the bezel there, so there's a back button and a more button. They'll light up when we get into the review. You have a power button on the side, stereo speakers at the bottom left corner through this little tiny 1mm opening, so not the most ideal place to put speakers. Samsung logo. The back is, it looks like perforated backing, but it is smooth, so it's just a piece of plastic.
It's actually very flimsy.
It's a very thin, flimsy piece of plastic. Make sure when you're taking this battery cover off that you're careful with it, because as you see in our unboxing video, you can definitely look at how thin it is. 13 megapixel rear facing camera with a flash. You have 3.5mm headphone jack. You have microphones up top and the back for when you're filming, and then the talking microphone along with the USB cable, micro USB, and then volume control.
And we'd like to thank our friends over at Wireless Wave on West 4th Avenue, Kitsilano in Vancouver for providing us with this review unit. Next, let's take a look at the software experience, which is really the defining feature on the Samsung S4. So this is your main home screen here. You can see a pedometer, so this will monitor steps, running. This is a story album, so you configure it to whatever galleries that you want, whether it's a family vacation or if you just want like a cool slideshow of photos of your trip to New York and whatnot. And you can get the Samsung Hub happening here, as well as various other things. Flipboard, you can tap here. So you can kind of set it all up.
Things that you're interested in.
Yeah, basically, if you're not familiar with Flipboard, it's like Pulse. It's basically like a reader, so it's pretty easy to get accessed in terms of news, reaching specific websites, or you know, just taking a gander at what is in the Flipboard database. So on your home screen here, what do we have?
Well, this is a phone, so we're going to check out what a phone can actually do, and that's call people. So this is what it kind of looks like by default. You can type in people's numbers. You can look at your most recent calls, your favorites. These will all show up as you add people to your favorites and as you start calling people and missing calls and all that. Here's your contacts, so you can see everyone on your list. You can text people. So there's your keyboard. It has a dedicated row for numbers. That's always a good thing, so you don't have to go into the symbol menu every time. Although it does have quite an array of symbols, even some squares. You usually see that.
It's for like people who have like the login or gamer tags with like symbols and stuff.
Dot greater than.
Yeah.
So you can send text and attach images and all that kind of thing. So standard phone functions.
It's a very insightful text that you just put.
Right? I should send it. Yeah, like I said, we showed the contacts, phones, messaging, pretty standard. We don't have to go too much more into that.
Yeah,
this is the
so-
web browsing experience
Yeah,
here.
we're on Wi-Fi, so we're not on like an LTE connection, but the web pages, of course, on LTE always load up fairly fast. You can see that pinching and zooming really quickly. With the default Samsung web browser, it actually has eye tracking motions, and it's a gimmick that you can turn on and off, but you could actually turn pages by just gesturing with your hands, which is cool, but it'll also take advantage of the front-facing web camera and track your eyes. So when you start looking at it, a little picture of an eye will appear here, and we'll show you a demo in a second. But basically, as you're looking down, the web page will actually scroll, and it only works with specific apps. So the S-Memo app with only the default web browser for Samsung. Not a lot of apps actually support it. It's mainly the pre-bundled apps that are installed. But if you're, say, looking at a cooking recipe and you don't want to muck up your phone with flowers and eggs and everything like that, you can just gesture. And Peter here will tell you a little bit more about some of the cool gesturing features that this phone has.
So you can see that I've just been kind of going back and forth with a couple of pages there. It's kind of hard to really show the eye tracking because you need to hold it about 5 to 6 inches away from your face with your eyes exposed, and we have a studio set up here, so we have about 3 or 4 people's sets of eyes between us, sound, so there's not going to be a way we can show that right now, but you can do things like gesture support and all that, so you can see you can change pages and all that. Well, we can also go to settings and go down to motion and gestures, and we're going to focus mostly on the air gestures because this is the one where you're actually going to be waving your hand. You can actually click on any of these to do a quick kind of try. So we can try this, put the phone on a flat surface. When it turns off, wave your hand above the sensor. So say your phone's in standby, you can wave your hand and then it wakes up. So that's one of the things. We'll just kind of go through these. Air jump. So you can move your hand up and down and you can see it kind of moves. I don't want to block the camera too, so it's going to be something you'll have to experiment with, but needless to say, it does have quite an extensive kind of list of things you can do with changing your pictures and all that kind of thing too. So it's pretty cool. They have and then there's air call, except this is the last one actually before we move on. So if someone's calling you, you can actually wave like that. Oh, left and right, repeat. There you go. So you get used to it. It's like anything, like people who've never texted before and they're like, how do you work this Fandango thing? It's just another thing you have to learn. So it's really cool though. I mean, it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most impressive elements on the S4 are these new features that are not really found on a lot of other phones. And of course it does have like split screens, so you could have phones that has bumping features,
Right.
S-Beam, where if you have 2 phones you can tap them against each other and actually share content, stuff like that. AirView.
Most phones now have NFC as well, near field communications, so that's a new kind of connectivity to trade data and all that kind of thing, pay for things.
Yeah, so this is running a more or less modern version of Google Android. It's running 4.2.2, and Samsung's been pretty good at being able to update it to the latest updates. So if maintaining a very solid and current generation of Android is important for you, I think the S4 is usually one of the first that actually gets paired and stuff like that.
Right.
KISS, screen mirroring, near devices, a lot of kind of cool stuff here. So basically, that was the main draw, is the things we showed here. There's a lot of pre-installed apps. A lot of these apps here is what you see when you first do it. So you have the full suite of Google apps, but you also have Google Play, which is obviously one of the most endearing app stores around. You can download hundreds of thousands of apps and get something to tickle your fancy. So what we're going to look at is the e-reading experience. So we have a few apps here: Kindle, Press Reader, and Marvel Comics. I'll show you how that all looks.
I'm going to start off with Kindle because it will show you the reading experience, and we're all about reading here at Goody Reader. This is what it looks like on default. Now, the gesture support isn't really compatible with everything, and it will show you a drop-down list of what it is compatible with when you go to the settings menu, and Amazon is unfortunately not one of them, so you can't really change like that. So you can tap the middle to bring up the text options here. You can do things like margin, line spacing, and making the text bigger and smaller. And you can also change reading modes, so black, sepia, and white, and as well as brightness. Long presses still do notes and highlights and more. You can search Wikipedia depending on what you highlight, search the book, make notes, highlights. So, the usual things we've seen. Bookmarks up top. It's overall pretty good experience. I believe you can pinch and zoom to change text sizes, although it's not dynamic. It won't go as you kind of move, but it does get the job done.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a 5-inch display.
It's a big screen. It's a good size, yeah.
Yeah, so even ebooks, I've noticed even like on 4.5 or 4-inch screens, a little harder to read. A 5-inch screen seems to have that sweet spot.
It's got just enough room to fit the right amount of text, I'd say, yeah.
And of course, this is the new Kindle for Android app. They recently pushed an update, so you haven't touched it in a while. Kind of cool new features, samples, the Kindle Store newsstand, things like that. So you can feel free to explore there. The next thing that we want to look at is, of course, Press Reader. So we'll give you a sense on how newspapers look. By default, well,
just the titles are readable, really, so you can't really read any of the articles. So you can do this one of two ways. You can pinch and zoom into each individual paragraph, like so. Find kind of that sweet spot. Or you can see any of these highlighted things. You can actually click on them, and then it goes into more of an ebook-esque feel to it. So you scroll the articles, like the columns of a newspaper, except you're scrolling them.
And if this font is too small for you, like it's probably small for a lot of people, you can enhance it.
Yep.
Dynamically it appears, or you can actually have the article read aloud to you if, say, you're dyslexic or, you know, your eyesight maybe isn't the greatest.
Exactly.
So, Press Reader is very good for that, for audio editions and so on. And of course, if a particular article strikes your fancy, you do have a myriad of sharing options. So if you're into newspapers, Press Reader is probably one of the better ones out there. Not a lot of double tapping to get an article happening, but that's okay. Let's check out comic books.
Now this is looking nice. Now, comics usually look better in portrait when they are in the full page, but of course when you go into guided view and all that, it obviously will look better in landscape. So
yeah, so let's just turn it quickly into landscape mode just to give you that sense on how it looks.
So here it is in landscape. Once again, the full page doesn't look quite as good, but if we dive into each individual frame, it ends up really looking good.
Yeah, so it really seems like if when you want to read comics using Comixology, Marvel, or any of the properties they support, like G.I. Joe and so on, and you want to get the best experience, I probably recommend putting it in landscape mode and use the guided view. Most comics have many panels, and it saves time for manually pinching and zooming, and you know, it gets a little bit discombobulated having to scroll like this and then scroll like that. So I think guided view is more geared towards phones, whereas you don't really necessarily need it on a tablet.
No, absolutely not. And you can see this frame looks great in portrait.
Yeah.
The colors are great, and it's super high resolution and a very big screen. So
Spider-Man has seen better days.
Indeed. Oh, man.
Alright, so if anybody was wondering, that was Age of Ultron. So yeah, I mean, basically overall, this phone is heavy on the gimmicks. a lot of kind of cool software-driven features that you do not necessarily need them. You can actually turn them off, and that's, I think, one of the things that endeared me the most, is that you could turn some things on and leave other things off. Peter, what are your thoughts on the Samsung Galaxy S4?
I think software-wise, it's definitely all there. I mean, they're introducing new features like all these gesture supports, eye tracking. I mean, that's going to be something a lot of people are going to use, I would assume, in the future. I mean, it's got a ton of preloaded content. It has a 5-inch screen, so all that content is just, you have so much screen to work with, and I don't think you can get much bigger than 5 inches on a phone without it becoming the next Galaxy Note, where it just looks like a kind of the middle ground between a phone and a tablet. So, I mean, it's not my favorite phone. I mean, I'm more, I don't know, there's just something about it that just seems so normal and so cookie cutter, because it doesn't have anything in terms of its defining features. It's just another phone. I mean, it's a screen with a bezel around it, and the speakers are all tucked away in the bottom left corner at the back under a 1mm flimsy battery cover. It's just, I don't know, it's not my favorite phone, but honestly, it's quick, it's snappy, all the software is there, but it's just a little bit, I don't know, there's something missing for me, but I mean, obviously that's just my take, and for me it's just a little bit too expensive too.
Alright, you've heard our thoughts, let's hear yours. Comment on this video and let us know what you think, and for all of our other videos, check out youtube.com/goodyreader, and for a review of the Samsung Galaxy S4 for goodyreader.com. My name is Michael.
This is Peter.
Everybody take care.
Your mind's made up? Yeah. It's just